So we're finally going to get into the Illustrator application. So I'm going to explain how this window works. This is by far one of the most difficult applications you will ever use in web development. It seems a little bit scary at first, but you know what? You just have to give it some time. We are only really going to touch the surface of this application. We're just going to use a fraction of the features that are in here. This is an awesome application. And after we get through the basics, there's all kinds of tutorials online that you can advance your knowledge in this if you choose to do so. So when Illustrator opens up now, it will bring up just your recent projects and show you. This isn't going to happen at school. Let me explain. At school, we have something called deep freeze on all of our computers, which is great because it makes sure that when your computer is shut down and brought back up, that everything goes back to the original settings. So you're not going to see your recent projects unless you've been sitting at the machine for a while and it's not been restarted. Otherwise, you're not going to see anything out here. So be careful of that on campus. If you save something on the C drive on campus, as soon as that machine is powered down, which it is every single night automatically, it's going to wipe out everything that's on that drive and you're not going to have access to it. So please make sure if you're signed on as yourself, make sure you save everything in your My Documents folder. That's the only folder that's backed up. If you save it on your desktop, it may disappear, it may not. I'm just forewarning you. You want to make sure that if you sign on as yourself at school, save everything into your My Documents folder. If you sign on as student, you have to save it to a jump drive or it's not going to be there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new product just to get the screen up. They do have the settings across the top now of the different types of products you can create. We know if we choose web that we're going to get the right color mode, and I do have a RGB color mode, and that everything's going to be measured in pixels, which is what we do for obviously posting anything on the web is in pixels. That's our measurement. So it has some common sizes that you see here. Typically you would create the document in the size of what you're putting in that document. If it's a logo, you want to make sure, I don't know, 200 by 200 pixels is probably large enough. You don't need to create it 1300 pixels and draw the logo in there. You want to make sure that you keep your canvas, I'll call it a canvas, the area. It's just like picking the piece of paper when you're in Word. 8.5 by 11 is the standard. But if you needed it legal size, a little bit longer, you would pick 8.5 by 14, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So just for learning the tool, you can pretty much pick any one of these options that you have here. I'm going to go with 1024 because right now that's the greatest we design for is the 1024. Obviously there's larger sizes out there. Okay. So mine may look a little bit different because I'm on a PC that's not locked down. So I'm not exactly sure how the screen is going to look when you sign on. Those of you working from home, anytime you change anything in an Adobe product, it remains that way every time you bring that application back up. So if you completely screw up your whole window here and you think, well, I'm just going to shut my computer down and restart it, and then it should go back to a default. It's not going to unless you're on campus because we have that deep freeze on the computers. So you have to understand what you're doing with all these options. And I did say it was a difficult interface. We have lots of things going on across the top, along the left, along the right over here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out because I don't think yours is going to show up like that. Okay, what we have in the middle here is basically what looks like a piece of paper. It's not truly a piece of paper. Illustrator calls them art boards. I'm going to call it a canvas because that's what we called it for years and years and years. So basically it's the size of the document that I said I wanted to create. By default, you may not get your rulers up here on top. If you turn your rulers on at home, they will remain there. At school, they may or may not. Like I said, it all depends on who installed it and what settings they put before they put deep freeze on the system. You definitely want to make sure your rulers are on. That's one of the first things I would do is click on View across the top, go down to Rulers, and Show Rulers. Now mine should come up in pixels because I told it I was doing a web document and the default for web is pixels. So if I come up here and I right click on it, at any time you can change this. So if you created a print document and it came up in inches, you certainly can change this to pixels. There's nothing that locks you into that type of document. Like I said, choosing the correct document just makes it easier for your development. Okay, so you definitely want your ruler on. I had a 1024 by 768 and it looks to be roughly that size. Okay, so we do have menu options across the top. They're your basic menu options. Underneath that, we have something called the option bar, just like we would have in Microsoft products. Over here on the left, we have what we call the toolbox. These are our drawing tools and everything that we need to draw anything here in Illustrator. Now your toolbox may be what I call one-up. They have these double arrows on the top. It may come in like this. I definitely recommend you go to the 2-up and you just a toggle back and forth. A lot easier when it's the 2-up, and this is basically how my videos are going to be taped, so you'll be a little bit easier to follow along. Over here on the right hand side, what we have is something they call panels. So these are quick access panels. If you hover over them, they tell you what each of the panels will do. What these panels are is they're basically separate windows. I'm going to click on this layers panel. You can see they have a bar across the top. They have tabs. I can expand it or put it back in the menu bar. And they have what's called a panel menu. So anytime I say a panel menu, these three little lines, we call this a hamburger menu in development, but that is a menu. So we know when we see that. Now each panel will have its own menu, different options on its menu. So when I say go to the panel menu of this particular panel, of course you got to be on the correct option for that. Now this is going to take a few weeks before you get remotely comfortable with this application. Please understand these next, I would say 3 weeks, are going to probably be the hardest weeks in this course. So until you get some time in this application and you get more comfortable with it, I unfortunately can't take away all the stress. So just bear with it. It will get easier. Okay, the layers panel is something we use quite often. We have to see our layers when we're drawing things. And so I'm constantly going to tell you to tear that off. Okay, you can just click on the entire thing. I clicked over here in a blank area. Now I have a bar across the top that I can drag around. I'm going to put that back over here to show you. So you could tear off one of the tabs only. So if I just click down on the layers, now I just have that layers option. Okay, I can put this back in there by dragging and dropping it in there. So I clicked in this darker area over here to the right. I may or may not want these other panels. They go hand in hand. That's why they're grouped together. So I like to rip the whole thing off together. So that's called ripping it off. So these all come up very small. And a lot of times we need to expand that. This layers panel, this is how I operate. The first thing I do is come in here, rip off the layers panel and make it longer. Every time you draw something in here, it's going to show up on a path underneath this, and you definitely need to be able to view it. Okay, so any of these panels, if you accidentally close it out, if I accidentally hit the X on my layers panel, okay, it's gone. It's not over here on my shortcut panel listing. Every single panel that you have is up here under window. So if you click on window, the one thing is you have to know the name of it. And they're pretty, they relate to whatever it was. But here's my layers panel. If I go ahead and I click on that, now I have it back. And it came back in the same size. Now when you change this on your own personal computer, it will stay that size and in that spot until you move it. But at school, you will have to do that every time because it's going to go back to that default that we have. Okay, over here is our tool panel. We are really only going to be using, less than 10 tools out of this panel. Like I said, there's so much going on in Illustrator and we're really just here to learn the basics, and we can get by with the basics for web development. Like I said, if you enjoy it, that's something you can research and go through the rest of them after you're done with this course. Depending on what tool you have selected, you're going to see your options across the top are going to change. So it depends. Sometimes they don't change till you actually use the tool. Sometimes they'll change right away. So it depends on the tool you have selected. So if you're doing something in here and I say on your option bar, choose this, but you don't have it, make sure you have the correct tool from your toolbox. The tools that have this little arrow in the bottom right hand corner, what that means is that yes, this is the type tool, but if you click and hold your mouse, this is my left mouse button, I'm clicking and holding it, I actually have 7 tools available to me in this option. So you can click and hold your mouse down, and if you want one of these other ones, just let your mouse go on the one that you want and it'll flip to that tool. So again, I'm clicking and holding. I'm going to go to the type tool, let go of my mouse, and then it automatically brought that tool up. Okay, when you're drawing, sometimes you need all of the tools that are in there, and I'm going to go down underneath the T is a rectangle tool. If I click and hold my mouse on that, pretty much when we're drawing, we use a lot of shapes. And what we can do on this is we can rip this panel off to make our drawing easier. The way we do that is we click with our left mouse, hold the left mouse down, don't let go. You let go on this black bar on the right hand side. As soon as I let go on that, now I have this on a separate panel. So that's called ripping off the panel. It's still available over here. I mean, you didn't get rid of it at all. Oops, I'm drawing. If you're just drawing something, you want it there for a little bit. When you close it out, it didn't delete it. It's still over here. You can click down and you can rip it off again if you want it accessible. So that works on anything that has that downward angle in the bottom right corner. This video is getting kind of long. I apologize. There's one more thing I'm going to go over. Up here under Window, there's something called Workspace. We use what's called an essential workspace. What that means is I'm going to click on Window and I'm going to go to Workspace and I'm going to choose Web. This is something they came out with later, are all these different workspaces. We've had Essential Workspace in Illustrator since day one. So I'm used to using the Essential Workspace. So when they came out with this Web Workspace, I'm like, this doesn't really help me much, so I just don't use this layout. All it's doing is under the window option across the top, it's opening different panels that it feels you need for web development. And then the quick access is going to have different panels as well. So if you accidentally close a bunch of panels out, anything like that, just come back up to Window, Workspace, and click on Essentials. That'll get you back to what view I'm using in the videos. Again, you can decide what view you like to use best. I'm using this view just to introduce the basic tools, but you certainly can move on from that. I don't grade you on using a specific workplace or workspace. I just want to make sure that starting out, we're all having the same look and feel. It'll save some of the headaches that you may run into.